Hi guys, and welcome back here at 1000 PS to another video. And in front of me we have the Honda CBR 1000 RRR SP. It's a long name, it's a great bike, and today we're going to find out if it's too much to handle. So stay tuned and watch.
So let's talk about the beast of a machine, as I like to call it, the Fireblade CBR 1000 RRR SP. Yeah, it was actually my first time riding such a monstrous, or rather such a powerful bike. And I was really looking forward to it, but looking back now, I have to say, for me, especially in everyday use, it's just too much power. No doubt, the engine is great, I never felt unsafe. And to my surprise, the riding position wasn't uncomfortable at all. Sporty, yes, but not overly aggressive. I actually sat quite well on it. The knee angle was totally fine for me too. But yeah, it really had so much punch, so much pull, and of course I had to rev it properly just to try it out. And there's clearly a lot of power packed into it. And especially as a less experienced rider, I thought, okay, maybe it's still a bit too soon for something like this. So yeah, I think I just need a bit more time to get used to it, to be able to say, okay, I can ride it the way this bike deserves to be ridden. As for the mirrors, great visibility, I had no issues there. The gear shifting was smooth, everything worked well, no complications. The brakes though were a bit too aggressive for me personally. Like, it was the kind of bike where when I really grabbed the lever, I was like, oh God, I just dived right into the front, which of course is actually a good sign. That in a panic moment, if you need to brake hard, it'll bring you to a stop almost instantly. But yeah, that also makes it a bit tricky in terms of modulation. You really need a good feel for it in your hand. Overall though, it's a well-made bike and absolutely gorgeous to look at. I really love the red. But for me personally, it just has too much power.
Let's move on to my impressions of this mighty Honda Fireblade. Well, first of all, I have to say that the riding position is very aggressive. This is a track-focused motorcycle, and you can really feel it, which means that for long-distance rides, it's probably not the most pleasant. And by probably, I mean almost certainly. Secondly, I want to talk about the suspension. It works absolutely fantastically. Even on country roads, it's set up quite firm. But that doesn't bother me at all. On the contrary. In the corners, I actually loved it, especially getting so much feedback from the front wheel. Thanks to the suspension and the aggressive riding position, the bike handles brilliantly in bends. And then coming out of a corner, the power. The performance this bike puts out is just insane. It's unbelievable how much power can come out of one motorcycle. And then on top of that, everything is perfectly managed by the electronics, so I actually felt pretty safe while riding. The display isn't the biggest, I'll just say that as it is. But it's a very modern and actually very nice TFT screen where I could read everything clearly. I had absolutely no issues with it. And the exhaust, that's just out of this world. We've got an Akrapovič exhaust on it, and the moment those valves open, chaos breaks loose. I mean, people in the next village or town will probably hear you coming from miles away, so yeah, it's an absolutely brilliant bike. Sure, it costs a lot, I'd say it's not cheap at all. But it's also an incredible amount of fun to ride. One last word about the quick shifter. It's very good, super easy to use, and works perfectly. Honda, I've got nothing to criticize here.
The Honda CBR 1000 RRR SP that we've just tested is, as you would expect, a true supersport motorcycle, and that becomes apparent right from the riding position. It's really sporty, almost extreme, you could say. Honda has toned it down a little though. On the first SE82, which came out in 2020, it was even more aggressive. Honestly, it was already a bit too much, even for the racetrack. So they've dialed it back a bit, and the clip-ons are now positioned slightly higher. But still, it's definitely on the very sporty side. Personally, I would still like to see it toned down a little more. Even for track use, I'd make it a bit more conservative and take some pressure off the clip-ons. One more thing that can be noted about the riding position is that alongside the low clip-ons, the knee angle is still quite aggressive, especially for road use. Even if you're aiming for sporty riding, the knee angle is very sharp and quite tight. That, combined with the low handlebars, makes it pretty exhausting to have fun on normal roads over longer stretches. We simply can't ride at the kinds of speeds on the road that you'd have on a racetrack, where this riding position probably works much better, and especially because of the amount of wind pressure from the front at high speeds. And you can only access a portion of the bike's power on the street. The bike makes well over 200 horsepower, but only in the upper rev range. When you consider how long the gear ratios are, even though first gear has been shortened compared to its predecessor, it still reaches up to around 140 km/h. So it's clear that just revving out first gear puts you well into illegal speeds on most roads. That gives you an idea of how difficult it is to actually make use of the rev range. And that's a bit of a drawback. From a street riding perspective, you're essentially dealing with a 200 horsepower monster, but at normal revs, the kind you'd use on the road, it's extremely tame and in some cases even feels underpowered. Because between, say, 4,000 and 6,000 RPM, where most road riding happens, you only get a small fraction of the engine's output. So for a 1000cc bike, the Fireblade behaves fairly mildly up to around 6,000, 7,000 RPM. You'd expect more. But that's because Honda has clearly focused heavily on maximizing power and peak performance at high RPM, and that's obviously targeted primarily at racing. Naturally, this comes at the cost of low-end torque and mid-range performance. Maybe in future they could integrate variable valve timing, like some competitors already do, to make things more flexible. But as it stands, you can really feel that below 8,000 RPM, things are a bit flat. And only beyond that does the real firepower kick in. That's when the CBR really lets loose and starts to gallop forward. Of course, that's difficult to actually use on public roads since, as mentioned, you're already going way too fast even in first gear. Another aspect is the sound, and the Fireblade is loud. It has an internal flap system that opens up or switches to a different exhaust channel at certain RPM and throttle positions, and when it does, it gets really loud. That's something that could definitely become annoying for people in the area if the bike is being used regularly on the street. And that's where Honda might want to rethink the concept a bit if they really want this to be usable on public roads. But when it comes to its sporting character and performance traits, the Fireblade is simply unmatched. The handling, the precision this bike delivers, and the agility, especially for a 1000cc motorcycle, is top class. It offers not just extreme stability when pushing to the limit, but also razor-sharp cornering precision. No wobble, no instability, even when riding over bumps, there's no disturbance in the chassis. A big contributor to this is the electronic suspension we get on the SP version. It allows for a wide range of settings, from comfort-focused setups for everyday riding, all the way to ultra-precise damping adjustments needed for the racetrack. There are also automatic modes, several of them, that can handle these adjustments for the rider. So you don't always need to worry about adjusting rebound or compression damping manually. The automatic system handles all that for you, managing the suspension valves depending on the riding conditions, whether you're in full acceleration or heavy braking, and by now this system works very well. What else is worth mentioning? Bridgestone. Bridgestone, thank you. Also worth mentioning, the brakes on the CBR are beyond reproach. The ABS system too is very well executed. And on top of that, it can be gradually disabled or fully turned off. That means you can brake right up to the point of rear wheel liftoff, which is great for experienced riders who want to push the bike to the limit, whether on the track or in other high performance situations. You can switch into that mode and access the maximum braking power and even slide the bike into a corner, if you want to and if you've got the skills to do it. And the bike also benefits from the excellent Bridgestone S23 tires, which are not only grippy, but also very neutral in their behavior. You get extremely precise turn-in with these tires. The bike is already very sharp and responsive by nature, and the tires complement that even more. In fact, you could say the Fireblade is so precise and stable that the Bridgestones don't even need to shine. The bike handles so well on its own. You could run a wide range of tires on this machine and still not upset its composure. But of course, it's still good to know that you've got tires underneath that offer not just loads of grip, but also behave predictably without any quirks. So, to sum it all up, following its tradition, Honda has truly managed to refine the Fireblade once again, to sharpen the blade, so to speak. It's a pure riding machine, clearly built for fast lap times on the racetrack. Of course, you can have a lot of fun with it on the street as well, but you'll have to accept some compromises in comfort due to the riding position and the engine, which really needs high revs to deliver power. And as we said earlier, that's not always practical or ideal on public roads. Still, it's a really well-executed package and a big thumbs up for the Fireblade.
That's all we've got about the Fireblade today for you guys. Leave your own opinion down in the comment section. Share with us if you think it's too much to handle, if you would like to try, if you think maybe less is more in this case. And yeah, I hope I'll see you soon. Like, subscribe, and bye-bye.